Good afternoon and welcome to today's IABC Heritage Region Members Only webinar, Business and Financial Acumen for Communicators. This session is the third in a series that will be presented by Jim Schaefer, an internationally recognized business advisor and leadership coach, a member of the IABC Heritage Region, and an esteemed IABC Fellow. My name is Mary Bogan, and I'm past chair of the IABC Heritage Region. Amy Miller, our past region chair and our new finance chair, is our tech guru for this webinar. Before Jim begins, Amy will review a few quick points to help you gain the most from this webinar experience.
Thank you, Mary. Everyone, if you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the chat button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Just mouse down to the bottom of your screen and your toolbar will appear and you'll see the chat button in the center. Jim will pause at various times to address the questions that have come in through the chat tool. We may also save some questions for the end. Today's webinar is being recorded. As a registered attendee, you will receive the following by Monday: a link to the recording, a link to Jim's slide deck for reference, and a link to our survey. And please do take just a few moments to send us your feedback. That's it. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Amy. And now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Jim Schaefer, who will present Business and Financial Acumen for Communicators. Jim is an internationally recognized business advisor, leadership coach, author, speaker, and leader of the Jim Schaefer Group, a team of seasoned advisors devoted to improving strategy execution through strong leaders and engaged people. Prior to starting the Jim Schaefer Group, Jim was a principal, vice president, and global leader of a Towers Perrin, now Willis Towers Watson, Center of Excellence. He was an architect and leading practitioner of the firm's change management consulting practice. His book, The Leadership Solution, immediately became a popular treatise on leadership, change management, and creating high-performance organizations. A regular contributor to many business publications and frequently quoted in business journals, Jim has taught at the graduate schools of business at George Washington University, Villanova, the University of St. Thomas, and Hamline University. He speaks regularly at leadership groups and professional associations, including IABC's World Conferences and the Heritage Region Conference coming up in November in Richmond, Virginia. With that, I'll turn the program over to Jim.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that very much. You know, it was a few months ago that Mary and Amy Miller had a discussion with me about the opportunities to have webinars in such a way that a lot of Heritage Region people could come together and share and chat and learn some of the things that are important to helping to create better organizations and better clients that we have. I want to thank Amy and Mary for leading this series because I think an awful lot of people, given the comments that we've received after them, have been very, very positive, and many people have said that they've helped them with their careers. One of the things that has stimulated a lot of what I do is the perceptions that a lot of communication professionals have about themselves and about each other. I did a session with Populo, the email communication organization based in Cork, Ireland, and this was a communication forum in Dallas in January. And they conducted an assessment of 1,100 communication professionals throughout the world. And the three main things that came back were is we're not viewed as adding value to our organizations. We have the wrong priorities. We're focused on getting channels out, whereas our leaders are focused on improving gross margin or whatever it might be. And we have a number of competency gaps. We'd like to have more skills and knowledge in certain areas. And that is what really stimulated this series of webinars. We started out, as you can see the little red X through the 4, we started out with 4 that many people said were their highest priorities. We have since added a fifth one on measurement, because so many people have said to us, we want to know and understand measurement better. We're going to talk about measurement today, but people have said they'd like to see a full hour webinar on that. The first one was on strategic advisory skills, and we talked there about how to become a better consultant, a management consultant, how to be an advisor rather than only a doer. Change management was about classic large-scale change and small-scale change. How do you turn an organization around, or how do you turn a function around? The third then is this one on business and financial acumen, and we'll be talking about that for the remainder of the hour. And then we're going to talk about leadership development on August 15. Leadership development is how do we as communication practitioners work with our leaders to develop their competencies and their capabilities? How do we work with other parts of the organization like sales and marketing, human resources, finance, and others to help leaders get stronger? So we're going to be addressing that on August 15. And then the one that we've added is on measurement. So many people say, well, what is it I'm supposed to measure? What should I measure? What are measures like? What do they mean? And so I'm going to get into that in detail. Today, I'm going to talk about measurement a good deal, because you can't talk about business and financial acumen without leaving measurement, and leaving measurement out of the whole discussion. So we're going to be talking about that in the session that will come at the end after the 5. Today's focus, though, is on managing communication as a results-driven business, meaning the communication function is a business helping the business become a stronger business. And that's what we meant by business and financial acumen. We need to be able to understand how to help our organizations or our client organizations get better at what they're supposed to be doing. So we're going to be talking about increasing business and financial acumen throughout this, coming from various different perspectives. How do we build the competencies for ourselves, and how do we help our organization have the capabilities and competencies needed to be a better business? That's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to involve some people here who I have worked with very, very closely, and I want to introduce them to you. The first on the left is Kristen Kelly. Kristen Kelly attended a workshop that Roger Dupree, who I'm sure many of you know, Roger Dupree, and I conducted in New York a number of years ago. Kristen heard from us what many organizations are doing to shift from a news and information distribution role to a role more focused on creating results and value. Kristen attended that and then went back to her organization at Owens Corning in Toledo, Ohio, and she talked to her CEO, Dave Brown, and said, I have learned what a lot of communication practitioners are doing out there, and they're doing a lot more sophisticated and results-oriented work. I want to do that. And so Dave invited her, and she invited me to join her at a meeting of the top 50 people at Owens Corning, and gave her an opportunity. This was not a one-off meeting. They had meetings every 6 months. And this meeting, he says, is devoted to improving communication so that it improves the results of our business. And she and I both talked to this top 50 or 60 people. Afterwards, Roger Myers came up afterwards. He's the head of manufacturing, and he said, I have just the place to go for you. I want you to go to Delmar, New York, upstate New York, because we've invested about $50 million in that organization, and we just can't get it to turn around. We think it is not a technology problem, which is what we invested in. We believe it's a people problem. So Kristen and I went to Delmar, New York, and over a period of time, I'm going to talk about this case study a little bit later, but over a period of time, we generated some very, very significant results. As you see here, we had almost a 9% productivity increase over about 5 months. The total savings was $737,400, and the return on the investment, meaning what we spent on me and her and other kinds of expenditures, turned a 700% return. So I'm going to be talking about some of the things that she's done over the years. Bob Kula is now at Kiewit Corporation. At the time that he contacted me, he was at Conagra Foods. And he said, we have a distribution center that represents all of our supply chain, and they have too much scrap, too much damage, and we need to get that scrap and damage out of there. Over a 5-month project, we got the damage out by about 65%. Productivity went up 16%. I'll talk more about Bob because Bob then went on to about 4 or 5 other operations in his company and now is at Kiewit Corporation as the Vice President of Communication. Kristen went from manager of internal communication to today she's at OI in Toledo. That is a large glass manufacturing company, and she's the Global Vice President of Communication. Courtney Reynolds contacted me. She was at ITT, and she said, we can't get Lean Six Sigma to stick. And we've got a place that our CEO, Steve Loringer, says has an opportunity to really make this go off. And so we went to Lubbock, Texas, and we worked there for about 8 months. And we were able to help improve on-time delivery. We got sales up by 30%, and a whole lot of other numbers were helped too. She's now gone to Northwestern Mutual in Milwaukee as Vice President of Corporate Communication. Scott Fiedler is a very cool guy. He's now at the Tennessee Valley Authority, but he was at FedEx at the time that I met him. And he said, I want to start moving into this direction too, where I'm not just putting things out, even though the things that are going out are good. I want to start having a difference on the operating and financial aspects of the business. And so we started out by going to Houston, where they were having a lot of truck accidents. And over a period of about 2 months, we were able to reduce that by about 54%. He then, on his own, went to the Memphis hub of FedEx and did a project very similar to what the truck accident project was about. It's just about a different subject. And he was able to get the freight claims down by about 25%. So these are people, among a lot of people that I've worked with, who have moved in this direction that we're talking about. They've gotten the kind of skills that they need in the area of business and the area of financial acumen. And they're doing great things now, as are a whole lot of others. I want to just introduce you to somebody else, and that is my friend Jack Stack. He's the CEO of Springfield Remanufacturing, now known as SRC, in Springfield, Missouri. Jack wrote the book, and I'll show you the book. Jack wrote the book, The Great Game of Business, which is about 20 to 25 years old. Everything in that book, that it's now in the 2nd edition, everything there is very current. When I was at Towers Perrin, I was heading the Change Communication Center of Excellence. And I would hire people, typically younger people, and I would say one of the first things we want to do is go to SRC. I want you to see what it's like there. I want you to learn this story about open book management, because I believe then and today that it is the purest form of open communication in all of business. So one of the things that I would recommend that anybody here who's listening to this and watching this and is interested in moving in a more solution-based practice or organization, that you go to Springfield and you attend the Get in the Game 2-day workshop, which is what I did with people who would go down there. And then I'd also go to their gathering of the games, which I spoke at last year in Dallas. One of the other things that I've done with companies like Owens Corning, ITT Corporation, and ConAgra Foods, who I've mentioned before here, one of the things that they've asked me to do is escort them to SRC, to have them learn how they do it there so that they can replicate it when they go back. I would strongly recommend any way that you can get to SRC and work with those people. We've got a program that we put together where we co-host, they and I co-host that, and people come away, again, I've heard the term more times than anywhere else, is I'm blown away at what kind of information people on the factory floor have to be able to make major financial decisions. So I strongly recommend that. Also go to the www.ggob, Great Game of Business, and then also visit the YouTube channel. But that is going to be your benchmark of the best way to manage communication, I think, that there is. Okay, I don't know how many people have been on this session in the previous 2, but one of the things that I did, and I'm going to do it again for those who are joining us for the first time today, is talk about the communication system as a whole, because communication practitioners sometimes are focused primarily on formal channels, which is important, But there's a whole lot more to that system than formal channels, newsletters, social media, and those sort of things. And so the whole communication system looks like this, and I'm going to describe it for you in two components. One is sources, and that's the blue part of this model. The second is the content, or the gold part of it. When the communication system sends out information, it is doing so, if it's well managed, to make decisions that create actions from people that drive results. If it doesn't do that, it's not working. If it doesn't do that, it may mean that you're spending more to communicate than you're getting back from that communication. But let's look at the sources for a moment. The sources are the leaders, systems, and formal channels. And deliberately, I have made those proportionately different. Leaders are by far bigger. It's because leaders have the biggest impact through what they say and what they do to influence the results of the business. The second are systems, and that's like reward systems, measurement systems, work processes, recognition, and things like that. The infrastructure of the organization that tells people what's important and what's not. And then the third piece, the smallest piece, is the formal channel, smallest in terms of the ability to influence the results. So we have about, in the leadership, is really 60 to 65% of the impact on performance. And this varies from company to company and industry to industry. The systems are in the 30 to 35% range, and then 5 to 7 in the formal channels. So communication practitioners who want to be responsible for managing communication and not just formal channels or just systems or just leaders need to step back and say, okay, how do I manage this whole system in such a way that I'm driving the right kinds of results? So as we talk further about this today, keep in mind that when I use the term communication, I'm using it in the broadest sense. I had a client in Florida, GTE Corporation, a telecommunications company, and Jorge Jackson was my client. He was the vice president of communication. He later went out to Los Angeles and was in the Westlake Village, just north of Los Angeles, and headed communication there. And it was at that time in January of 1994 that we had what's called the Northridge earthquake. A very powerful earthquake that did an awful lot of damage. One of the things, though, that the GTE people did very, very well is they got their act together very, very quickly and went out and took care of their customers. And they took care of their customers in a way that didn't mess around with all the policies and procedures that can happen in the telecommunications business. What they did was they just went and took care of the customers. And so Jorge called me about 2 weeks after the Northridge earthquake, and he said, Jim, I'd like you to come out here and interview our leadership, interview our employees, interview our customers and our suppliers. I want to know that how we can replicate what happened out here, because these people were never so turned on, and I've never seen employees so turned on in my life. They violated what would be bureaucratic rules in the sense that they didn't get in certain kinds of permission to take care of their customers, but they delivered for their customers. They didn't overspend. They used their common sense, and they got incredible comments from the customers and from the entire neighborhood. I then took all the information from my interview notes when I went out there. And by the way, I was lying in bed at midnight when an aftershock sent a whole bunch of stuff off the ceiling onto me in my bed. But I put a team together, including Diane Gearson, who is now the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at IBM. I put 4 of us together who I thought could really work this issue. And one of the things that I said is that we have got to find a way. We're not going to operate like they did during the earthquake, but we got to find what it was that enabled us to get to a much, much higher level and then be able to sustain it. And so what we did is we went off into our little bungalows and we worked on this, and we had our spreadsheets and we had our flip charts, and we did an awful lot of work on this. And we came back and we presented it to the leadership at Towers Perrin, and we said, essentially, what we want to do is help or capitalize on what we learned at the Northridge earthquake. How do you get people turned on, excited, et cetera, et cetera? And we called it employee engagement. The term had never been mentioned before or used before. And we said, we're really, truly engaging people into actions that are going to cause performance to go up at a greater level than the cost of getting that to go up. And so one of the things that we created was a definition of employee engagement. Again, nobody used that term. It was always employee satisfaction and then employee commitment. They were not using the term engagement. So engagement is a condition that exists among employees when they feel passionate about their jobs. That's called cognitive identity in the fancy places, are committed to the organization and its customers, and use their discretionary effort to improve results. That's a very important underlying piece there, because one of the things that I'm seeing is a whole lot of, how did I do that? Well, I got way off. Sorry about that, folks. I just hit a button that didn't want me to hit. Probably, okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, a whole lot of people are using the word engagement very informally, almost sloppily. I'm going to blame a lot of people in the social media area, and I work in that area to some extent, but they see it as a very soft thing. It's, did somebody open something? Did somebody share something? Well, the fact is you can open and share stuff and not make any money because you're very activity-based instead of results-based. I'm not picking on social media, but they use the word engagement in a very, very different way than we have been using it, sort of, I'd say, on the business side of things. And so employee engagement shouldn't be your goal, because if employee engagement is all you're trying to do, you just got a lot of happy people out there, so-called satisfaction that we used to call it. It should be the means to generating higher operating and financial performance. If you're spending money on social media, and I see all these social media organizations that are for exchanging employee information among employees, but it's a lot of activity, sharing, but there aren't results tied to it. And that's what's causing a lot of senior leaders in the organizations to say, hey, time out, let's not quite invest quite so soon on this until we know where it's going and we know what we're going to do about it. So engagement is a means to an end. It is not the end unto itself. I'm going to hit that button. I'm not going to do what I did before. Engagement needs direction. Okay, so if we decide we're going to go engage people, we need to step back and say, where are our best opportunities to create performance improvements by better managing communication and engagement? So we step back, and for some of you are familiar with what's called a Pareto. It's sort of an 80-20 rule. What we do is we try to identify what's the 20% of our organization that we could influence and get 80% return. It may be, as you see in the blue box on the top, something dealing with delivery, on-time delivery. It could be on-time delivery to a customer. You promise a customer you'll have it by Wednesday, they get it by Wednesday. Cycle time, the amount of time that it takes to do a new product changeover, shift from one model of car to another model of car at the Toyota factory down in Georgetown, Kentucky. How long did it take to do that? Well, they can do it in 4 minutes, and it used to take some of the General Motors about 4 hours to do it. Safety, what are recordables, that is accidents, and then near misses, which is a good thing. Most organizations try to get near misses recorded and make that higher, because what we want to do is identify what caused that near miss so that we can make it go away and we won't have an accident around that issue. Quality, first pass, something going through the system and it makes it through the first time at the highest level of quality. Or first call resolution, as it's called in contact centers or call centers. Costs, like yield loss. In my kitchen, I'm making a pie and I have flour in my measurement cup, and I drop it accidentally and I spill it. Well, that's loss, and that happens in bakeries and can happen in a lot of organizations. Or changeover speed, how long did it take to change from one kind of work to another? Those kinds of things are the things we need to look at on our organizations as we think about engaging people. Where are the best opportunities that if we attack this, we're going to get the kind of return that we need? There are 4 drivers of engagement. This is what came out of this group that I led in New York back at Towers Parent, and we are still using it, and we just are doing it in a hyper way now. One is people need to have line of sight. I need to be able to understand exactly what I can do to cause what kind of impact. The second is involvement and autonomy. To what extent am I involved in the process and own the process? To what extent do I have some degree of autonomy over my work? Information. What information do I need to make the right decisions at the right times to make those scores go up? And finally, what's in it for me? Why is it in my best interest to do this kind of work and to help make this improve? What am I going to get out of it? Those are the four main drivers. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment as we are sort of in the middle of this discussion and see what kinds of comments or thoughts that you have. Mary?
Jim, we don't have any questions yet.
Okay, all right. Well, feel free.
But yes, let me remind people, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box.
Okay, please do.
And if you're not sure where the chat box is, use your mouse to scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen. Your ribbon will appear at the bottom, and there is a chat, chat button on the bottom, a little towards the right. So.
Okay, so the critical thing to remember is in this condition over here, that in order to engage people to hit a target, quality, service, cost, speed, productivity, cycle time, whatever it might be, that there needs to be strong line of sight, strong involvement, lots of information sharing, and definitely, why is it in my best interest to do this? Because if that isn't there, nothing's going to work. All right. One of the things that I find to be very, very helpful is to ask the right questions. If I am trying to help a client improve some part of their business or manage a merger or whatever it may be, what I try to identify is that Pareto, going back to that Pareto, 20% of the effort creates 80% of the gain. And what I try to do is I try to ask certain kinds of questions that I'm going to suggest that you ask in order to really get to the business problem as a communication practitioner. Number one, where are the best opportunities to improve performance by better managing communication and engagement? Now, what I didn't say there is where are the best opportunities to improve communication. I have probably interviewed I don't know how many people. And I remember one in Denver, Colorado, a woman was saying, well, I think our internet can be improved. And I said, well, wait a minute. I didn't ask you about improving communication. I asked you about opportunities to improve performance by. And so what I use that for is I don't want them just thinking I just want to come up with some communication stuff. I want them to know that I'm there to help them improve things that matter around quality, cost, et cetera, et cetera. And so the first question I ask, and I would encourage you to consider using these questions, is what's the best opportunity to improve what you're trying to get, a result? 2, what's the size of the opportunity? What are the root causes of the underperformance? And then what will it cost to improve, and is the ROI acceptable? The reason why I use these questions and I try to help my communication clients understand that is that many times communication people, when I was at the World Conference a year ago, not Montreal, but the DC, Washington, DC, I was working in a session as I was speaking, and they kept saying, well, I think we ought to use, and they gravitate toward the communication solution, the newsletter or social media or more involvement meetings or whatever it was. And I said, wait a minute, time out. We haven't really identified the problem yet, nor do we know what the root cause is. And we want to make the root cause go away. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example of a situation in Orlando not long ago where the communication people were told we have to do something about stealing in our warehouse. People are going in there, they're breaking in, and they're stealing stuff out of our warehouse. And he said to the communication people, I need your help. Well, the first recommendation that came up, hand raised, was, I think we need a brochure on not stealing. And I looked at the leader, and the leader looked at me, and he said, what do you think? And I said, well, do we know that the root cause of the stealing is the lack of a brochure? That if we had a brochure, they'd all go away. All the stealing would go away. And the communication people just kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, before we decide the solution, we need to know what the problem is. And to know what the problem is means you know what the root cause is. If you make the root cause go away, then it will be more apt to go away, presumably forever. So these are the questions I like to ask people as we start looking for where are the opportunities to improve our business. Let me give you an example of asking certain kinds of questions as it dealt with Kristen Kelly and I when we went to Del Mar, New York, in the first project that we did at Owens Corning. So I'm going to ask the question and I'm going to give you the answer that we selected. Where are the best opportunities to improve performance by better managing communication? The answer is upstate New York operation where $50 million had been invested to improve overall performance. Remember Scott Myers saying, that's where I want you to go. 2, what's the size of the opportunity? The potential 8 to 10% increase in productivity and a $600,000 to $700,000 savings. How did we get that information? We got that information from talking with the finance people, both at corporate in Toledo and in Del Mar, New York. We talked to the operations people. We did a number of interviews. We did enough data gathering to be able to be pretty darn sure that these were the numbers. What are the root causes of the performance problem? We talked to the employees at Del Mar. We talked to the leadership at Del Mar. And they had poor labor management communication, lack of standard work methods. They do a work process and they do it 5 times and they do it from 5 different ways. The issue around poor labor management relationships is best described by the fact that when the plant leader would bring all of the employees together in an all-employee meeting, he would come up to the podium and he'd start to present, and everybody in the union would turn around, 90-degree turnaround, and face away and pull up their newspapers and read them. There was that kind of animosity between the leadership, the management, and the union. And so we had a big issue on our hands. Finally, we asked, what's the cost to improve? And we said that the estimated $150,000 over 5 months, we could hit our target about $600,000 to $700,000. Here's what we did. We brought the company and the union leadership together as a single leadership team. We said, no more, this is a leadership team, this is a leadership team. We're going to come together. Our meetings are going to be joint. So we are communicating between the union leadership and the management leadership. 2, we involved employees throughout the operation to identify opportunities to improve both operating and financial performance. We got employees involved in the communication process who had never been involved in the communication process. We encouraged employees to take the lead on improvement projects. This did not have to be led by bosses, did not have to be led by the union. We wanted everybody to be involved and understand what was going on and work together, and we wanted employees to take the lead in doing that. We created mini games. Mini games are something I learned at SRC years ago, and I use them all the time. They're small games that people play. They set themselves a target. They put a team together to attack that target, and they have little prizes for each other, and whether, it can be all kinds of things. And so the little mini games are very, very powerful and are able to create significant performance. And then finally, we initiated standard work processes. So every time that they did what's called an oven cleanout, cleaning out an oven, just like in your kitchen, but it was a lot bigger in this factory. Every time they did it in a different way. There was no standard process like a pilot has a standard checklist when he or she takes off from an airport. And so we put that kind of a package together, and we were able to generate the kind of returns that we said we would be able to do. I'm going to stop at this point and do another pause. Anybody got something that you want to add or ask about?
I've got a couple of questions, Jim.
Okay.
How can we definitively connect the ROI we deliver as communicators to operating income or revenue?
Well, it's relatively easy. All right. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's call this person Bob. Bob's the head of communication. And Bob makes $100,000 a year, making all this up. How much time did he spend on the solution, just his own time, compensation? And you could even, if you do it really intricately, you also add to it what are called fully loaded costs. That means benefits costs, that's 35 to 45%. You're going to create a formula for this. And so you've got his cost, and then you've got other communication people's costs, and then any outside costs. I'm going to talk about what's called a value to cost assessment, which will cover a little bit of this. But you can easily identify what was the cost of getting a gain. And then you identify what was the size of the gain. And let's say it's an on-time delivery issue, and you've had a problem, and you're losing customers to the point where you've lost $200,000 a year. You put this team together to go fix that problem, and let's say that $100,000 plus fully loaded costs and other people, and the $200,000 gain, and you can tell what the formula is, and you have a return on investment. We don't go into any organization and spend more than we get back. We calculate it ahead of time. In fact, Kristen and I went down to Gardner, South Carolina, because one of the plants down there said, geez, I've seen what you've done in about 3 plants, Kristen and Jim. I'd like you to come here. And we went there, and we talked with the financial people and the operations people. We said, we don't think if the size of your gain is big enough to justify the cost. It's going to cost you more to get less. The problem will go away, but you will have spent a lot more money. So the best way to do it is just simply to look at your costs based on you as an employee and your compensation, your direct comp and your indirect comp, and any other costs, and then identify what the gain is, and then you either go for it or you don't go for it. Was there another question?
Yes. Love the strategies in the example you shared about union leadership. Some of us need first to convince leadership that our sphere of influence as communicators reaches across functions, especially in organizations that are siloed. What tips do you have for overcoming some of those preconceived notions about what we as communicators do so that we can better influence ROI?
Well, I'm writing a note here to myself about what you're saying there. I think there's a difference between what we do and what we can do. The one issue that I think HR is like this, finance is like this, communication people are like this. They're sort of pigeonholed to some extent. Many communication people who have been assuming the role of formal media channel execution, that sort of thing, and haven't gone out of that area, do find themselves struggling with how do I get out of that, image that I have as I'm I'll give you a person who's one of the smartest people I know. She's about 34 years old. I worked with her at one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the United States, and she's got a graduate degree. She's got a degree in communication at Northwestern and an economics degree at Northwestern, and she's referred to as the Twitter girl. So you see exactly what you're talking about. She's nudged into this area that she's the Twitter girl. She's brilliant. She's bright. I think the world of her. I worked with her for about 2 years when I was working with this pharmaceutical. So what she did is what Kristen did is she went back to her leadership and said, look, communication people are capable of doing a lot more than getting out the next fill in the blank. And I would like to, and not everybody wants to move in that direction, but she wanted to move in that direction and is in that direction now. But she said, look at what they're doing here and what they're doing here and what they're doing here. She did what Kristen did. She said, Kristen said, here's what they're doing at this company and this company and this company. And I can do that. I want to do that. The beauty is in most organizations, leaders today are sophisticated enough that somebody comes and says, I want to give you more. They're going to say, that sounds like a good idea, particularly if it's not going to cost me anymore. So one way to do it is to say, I want to do this. Here's what they're doing elsewhere. I would take this slide deck right here and other things that you might have and say, look what they're doing out there. I can do that too. Or as somebody told me, I don't know how to do it, but I want to learn how to do it. Can I do that? So that would be my first recommendation. I've just seen it all work like that. I saw Kristen, Bob Kula, all the people that I mentioned up front, the Scott Fiedlers, and a whole lot more people didn't know how to do it at first, but they learned how to do it. And what they do for themselves is they create immense pull. Think about Kristen Kelly, the very first time that she did this project, which you see over here in the lower right, what she created, she started creating pull. Somebody else out in Santa Clara, California called us and said, we want to do what you guys did in Del Mar. And then they went down to Fairburn, Georgia, just south of Atlanta. And then they went out to Waxahachie, Texas, and did the same thing. She and I went to about 6 different places, and then she took it globally and said, this is the way we're going to do communication in this organization. Did that answer the 2 that are the ones that came up there, Mary?
Yes, and we've got one more.
Okay, let's go for that.
Is there a financial terminology resource that you would recommend for those of us who do not fully understand how to read financial reports?
Oh, well, SRC would be an excellent place to go. Absolutely excellent.
And SRC is an acronym for what?
Well, it used to stand for Springfield Remanufacturing Corporation, but they don't call it that anymore. They call it SRC. So that is in Springfield, Missouri. That's where I told you that I was with Towers before I would get, when I'd hire somebody new, particularly young people, but also older people, we would go to SRC. I would escort them there. I would help them see what it is that's important to them from a communication standpoint. They would also have plenty of opportunity to talk with the operations people, the financial people. I know all the folks at the Great Game of Business, which is it's a business of SRC. And the people who I've taken there have gotten incredibly smart about things like that. How do you read balance sheets and operating income, all the different financial measures. That would be a very, very good place to go.
Okay, thank you. One last thing.
Sure.
We've got about 17 minutes.
Okay, all right. Okay, one of the things that, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, is one of the things, because we're going to talk a lot about measurement, but the importance of moving away from communication measures only and moving toward business measures. The ones on the left here are communication measures. They can be useful. They're process measures. They are things that need to be achieved before you can get the results measure. Opening an email may enable you then to get a sale, that sort of thing. So while the sales may be the goal, the process goal may be just, getting an email, sending emails out at the right time in the right place, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to focus you on that. But if you want to get really into the measurement, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in the last session, or the fifth session. These are the understanding the measures and what we need to do to, safety has a couple of different kinds of measures, as I talked about earlier. So those are going to be here for you. I wanted you to have these. The second thing is to adopt a value proposition. That is, what am I in the business to do? And make sure that you build a business case for everything you do. If you do that, people are going to start seeing you as a business person. This is Teresa Paulson's and her Conagra leadership team, communication team. Their value proposition. We need to help the company either make money or save money. And she says, she said to Gary Ronick, we're going to stop doing this and we're going to start doing this, and got his approval on that. And so they were able to walk forward and start doing different kinds of work that added much more value than the other work. I'm going to show you this value to cost assessment. A value to cost assessment is managing communication like a business. And it's really important that as you do this, you identify three pieces of this. How important is an activity? And each one of these blue buttons there is an activity. Call it a newsletter, or call it meetings with my supervisor, whatever it may be. How important is it to helping our organization succeed? 2, how well is it performing? 3, what's the cost? And we put that together, and we have over on the left side here the before. And so you see only a couple of things upper right are in the positive zone. Over at the upper left are things that are important but not performing well, and the things down at the bottom are the things that are not important. What we do then is we take a look at all those when the survey data comes back to us, and then we say, how do we manage this? And it doesn't always mean that we try to fix something or improve it. Sometimes we have something that scores very, very low, like Yammer at one client, but it was because they didn't have a good adoption strategy. And so we helped them put an adoption strategy in, and the thing took off and became a very, very positive media. But we look at every single one of the media, how it was scored, and determine what we're going to do to redeploy resources so that they are getting high value. CEOs love this because it's portfolio management to them. Rick Wagner, General Motors CEO, and his communication person and I met one day, and we showed him this thing, and he said, my God, this is portfolio management. Gary Rodkin out at Conagra Foods said the same thing. He says, I like that little 4-box thingy. I want to do one of those, because you're doing something that these people are very, very familiar with. Value to cost assessment. And then finally, align the business systems. Those business systems can cause people to perform in unusual ways. The distribution center that I talked about, Bob Kula did with me in Indianapolis, the incentive comp we found was paying 80% for productivity, 20% for safety, 20% for quality. They were getting what they were paying for, with people running around trying to be very productive, slamming into each other, having lots of waste, lots of rewrap, as they call it, at the Conagra Foods food kind of an organization. When we found the incentive pay, compensation, was communicating to supervisors, forklift drivers, and everybody else to just get it in the truck, was more important. And it was causing $200,000 in damage in the distribution center we were working in Indianapolis, and $2 million in the supply chain throughout the organization. I was going to talk a lot about business and financial literacy at ITT Corporation, but I have probably a little more content than I have time for. But I want to show you what is in this deck, because what we did, we were asked to come into Lancaster, Pennsylvania's ITT operation and help them link people to the business strategy and get more business and financially lit. I'm going to take you through this very quickly and just show you what it is. We're going to send this to you as part of the package, and you can go through it much more slowly. And if you've got questions about it, call me, email me. All the information is here. But we started with a business and financial literacy plan. This is a plan. I'm going to give you time later to look at that plan, because I want to be available to answer some questions here at the end. But it goes through like this: who we are. Pretend like you're at a all hands meeting, and the leader of the operation is taking you through who we are, where we fit into ITT. Here are our products. Here are our major customers. If we don't meet our customers' needs, here's our competitors. We created scoreboards throughout the organization. So this is the Lancaster site scoreboard, where we created scoreboards for communication, for HR, for operations, for finance. Everybody in the organization had a scoreboard that was disaggregated from the site scoreboard, meaning it was the version of the scoreboard for HR, but connected up to the same kinds of things that the site as a whole was being held accountable for. We then communicated in the same all-hands meeting about what do the measures mean, what is on-time delivery, for instance. And if you look at the green part, example of on-time delivery in your home, what we did is we created things that people would experience in their houses and homes, and so they could say, oh, I understand that. A school bake sale. If you promise you're going to have something by a certain date and you don't have it, well, you haven't hit your goal. And operating income, this was their big issue there. So what is operating income? Again, you'll have a chance, and here's another household kind of a thing. You'll have a chance to take a look at these. And again, call me or email me if you got questions. Why do we want people to learn about OI? Because the company, that is its measure, and it is, if we do well at OI, we do well at almost everything else. Then we said, in every single department, we want to know this pure flow polishing. They polish valves. And we wanted to know what its effect on OI and how it affected them. So every employee in the organization understood from their department, I'm just using one of the departments here, their department, how they could affect it and in what way they did. And it started wiping out all kinds of waste. And so that an OI went up and they scored higher at OI than any other IT&T operation. When ITT succeeds, we all succeed. This is sort of a little pep talk here toward the end. How can we make a difference? And this is Heather Sando, who was a communication person who we worked with out there. And here's what we were able to do in about 8 months. On-time delivery went up 38%. Total cycle time went up 31%. Gross inventory terms, 18. Productivity, 7.1. Sorry about the P. Safety from 13 recordables to 0 recordables over a period of a year. Savings from pure flow rework game. We put a mini game on a project and we got a $95,388 savings. So return on investment for that project. That is all the time that Heather and Courtney Reynolds was also part of this when I introduced you to her earlier. We were able to, and this is my costs, their costs, and all that, 1,148% return on investment. Again, we don't start something up unless we have it pretty well assured that we're going to get a really good return. Okay, that's the body of it. Here, if you want to sign up for my newsletter, here it is. A lot of communication people subscribe to it. I talk about leadership issues, communication issues every other week. We're going to be coming to Dallas. We're going to be putting on October 4th and 5th. AT&T has offered to host us and sponsor us. We're going to be doing managing communication to drive results and value. It's a workshop down there, so I'd love to consider that. Then I've got other things about workshops. I've got stuff here about a suggested reading list. A lot of communication people say, what can I read to get up to speed? I've got it categorized by fundamental works, strategy, leadership, people, and communication, transformational change and Lean Six Sigma, and specific concepts and disciplines. All the rest of the slides in here are about each one of those. For instance, here are the ones on strategy. Okay, so that is the end of the content. I've now got about 7 minutes, I think it is, to address any other issues that you might have.
We don't have any other questions in the chat box right now.
Okay, well, everybody knows all this stuff already. Shoot. All right, let me remind you of the 5 competency series. It went from 4 to 5. We've done the business and financial acumen today, where we talked about how do you manage communication as a business, more so than we have in the past, where we are distributing information. Now we're creating results versus just activity. And we have talked about some of the financial aspects and some of the measurement aspects. Next month, August 15, we're going to talk about leadership development. How can communication practitioners play a bigger role in improving leadership throughout their organization? A really good example of this was with Conagra Foods when we were working with them. Bob Kula played a big role in this, and that is the communication people were sort of the doers. They were the stuff that got stuff out. And so the leaders would order up certain kinds of things. I need talking points for this meeting. I need this. And the communication people started to realize that where their value wasn't in doing talking points, even though talking points are certainly important. But what if we taught our leadership and built their capabilities and their competencies in leadership so that we weren't doing that? We started to take on a new role as communication practitioners. So as the people who just did the talking points, we now were coaching them and counseling them in a way that they started to be stronger leaders. So I'm going to talk about what communication people can do if they want to move in that direction. Not everybody wants to move in that direction, but some people want to get away from I'm the doer guy. And instead, I'm the strategic advisor. And that's a lot about what we talked about in that first session back in May, is at the top of the page. The next one, and the last one that we have scheduled, is on measurement. And that's where we're going to get into a lot more detail about measurement and how you go about measuring, how do you anticipate, how do you forecast, how do you apply the 80-20 rule of the Pareto to organizational problems that you have. Okay, well, that's all I have. Mary?
We have one more question.
Okay.
Jim, is there a book you can recommend on understanding financial reporting?
I don't know of a book about understanding financial reporting. I don't know a book, no. I know of a number of sources where you can go. I have seen online, because I was asked by somebody recently about operating income, and I did a lot of work with the people at ITT in Lancaster on that, but I would at least start there. But I don't know of a book. There are some books on Lean Six Sigma that have, there's one that I have up in my bookcase there. It's on, I think it's called Financial Something for Lean People, or Lean something, Lean Six Sigma. It's a pretty good one because I've done a lot of work in Lean Six Sigma. If somebody would leave their name, it's on a bookcase about 10 feet from me, but I don't want to take the time looking for it. So if you could give me your contact information, I will send you that book, or the name of that book. And if I've got any others that are up there, I will glad to help you out.
Great.
There's the bookcase behind me. It's somewhere up there. It's there. It's black. All I know is it's black.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
If anyone has any post-webinar questions, you can email them to heritage-region@iabcheritage.com. And I've put the email address in the chat block. And Jim has mentioned our next webinar will be on leadership development on Wednesday, August 15th. And you will be getting emails from that as we get a little closer to that date. And if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank everyone for coming. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this subject. And I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much, too. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Mary.